What if the thing you were praised for is the very thing that's been erasing you? What if every win took you further from the person you used to be? What if success, the very thing you built your life around, was the mask that made you disappear? You did everything right. You followed the blueprint, paid the price, made the sacrifices. They handed you a script called greatness, and you learned every line. You sharpened yourself into a weapon of productivity. You mastered the smile. You kept moving, you kept performing, and the world rewarded you for it. You became who they needed you to be, but somewhere along the climb you stopped asking who you were. Carl Jung warned us, the persona is that which in reality one is not, but which oneself, as well as others, think one is. And if you wear it too long, it becomes a prison you forget you're inside. Because here's the part they never say out loud. Most people don't collapse from failure, they collapse from winning in the wrong direction. Marcus Persson sold Minecraft for $2.5 billion. He bought the mansion, flew to Ibiza, surrounded himself with the elite. Then he tweeted, "I've never felt more isolated," not because he failed, but because he succeeded at becoming someone who couldn't feel joy anymore. This is the paradox of the hollow champion. You climb every mountain they say matters, and at the top you don't find meaning, you don't find peace, you don't even find people, you find silence, and a view that doesn't heal you. The silence becomes unbearable, not because it's empty, but because it's honest. And that's when the questions start creeping in, not the dramatic kind, the quiet kind, the kind that sound like, is this all there is? Why do I feel lonelier now than when I was broke and invisible? If they love me so much, why do I feel so unknown? In that moment you realize the applause wasn't healing you, it was distracting you from the truth. You've built an empire around being everything to everyone, except to yourself. You traded your truth for trophies, your joy for relevance, your soul for validation. And now there's nothing left to climb. Just the realization that you're standing on top of a world you don't belong to. In the ancient story of King Midas, he asked the gods to turn everything he touched into gold. And they gave it to him. He touched a rose, gold. A loaf of bread, gold. His daughter, gold. And then he starved, surrounded by treasure. A man who gained the world and lost the ability to taste it. You didn't fail. You got everything. And now your hands are full of gold, but your chest feels hollow, because what they called success was just another name for disappearing beautifully. Applause is a language. At first it says, you matter, we see you, keep going, and so you do. You sharpen the edges, you raise the bar, you become sharper, smoother, stronger. You start planning your life around the next standing ovation, but something begins to shift. The applause no longer lifts you, it weighs you down. Not because it stopped, because it never really saw you. Carl Jung wrote that when we identify too strongly with the persona, we become identical with it, and then the damage is done. The damage isn't physical, it's spiritual. You start to lose the difference between who you are and who you're supposed to be. They call you a leader, a genius, a warrior, a miracle. And so you learn to bleed without making a sound. You show up when you're empty. You smile when you're in pieces. You say yes when your body is screaming no. Because what would happen if they saw you crumble? This is how applause becomes a cage. Every time they cheer, it tightens. Every time they admire you, it isolates you more. Approval addiction doesn't look like weakness. It looks like overachievement, like saying yes too often, like calling exhaustion grind mode, like hiding depression under charisma. Olympic gold medalist Alison Schmidt stood on the world's highest podium and felt her soul slip out from under her. She said, I didn't want to show weakness, so she didn't, until it nearly killed her. Shaun White, another Olympic legend, called it the incredible crash, that violent silence after the medal, after the high, when you return to ordinary life and realize you no longer know how to be ordinary because your worth was tied to the extraordinary. And now, everything else feels like failure. This is the hidden trauma of being praised. You get addicted to being inspiring, but inside you're gasping for someone to just say, you don't have to be amazing today, you don't have to hold it all, you can just be. But when your whole life is performance, even rest feels like risk. You can't take the mask off because you're not sure what's under it anymore. You walk off stage, still smiling, still grateful, still performing. And then, in a hotel bathroom under dim fluorescent lights, you stare into the mirror and nothing looks familiar. That's not you. That's the version of you they love, the version that gets the applause, the version that's been slowly replacing your reflection. You lean in, looking for yourself, and find only performance residue. You don't cry, not yet. You just stand there, frozen, in the stillness between who you are and who you've been paid to be. And in that silence, something ancient rises, something raw, something rebellious. It says, you were not born to be a symbol. You were not made to carry everyone else's hope while ignoring your own despair. You were not built for burnout disguised as brilliance. In that moment, you see the cage for what it is. Applause is only beautiful when you're allowed to walk off stage and still feel worthy in the quiet, but you haven't had quiet in years, so maybe now you stop clapping for the version of yourself that's been killing you and start listening for the voice that was buried beneath the standing ovation. There's a kind of collapse that doesn't make a sound. No one sees it. No one suspects it, because from the outside everything still looks perfect. The clothes are tailored, the smile is flawless, the brand is intact. But something inside you is starting to come undone. Not because you failed, because you succeeded at becoming someone who can't feel anything anymore. You walk off stage into the silence of a luxury suite. You set down your phone, and for once, you don't check it. You just stare into the bathroom mirror, and for the first time, you can't look yourself in the eyes. Not because you see shame, but because you see nothing at all. Carl Jung wrote, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely, but how can you accept what you've hidden for so long? You've become fluent in what's expected, but you've forgotten how to be honest. That's when it starts, not as a scream, but as a whisper. I miss me. You miss the parts of yourself you left behind on the altar of success, the softness, the stillness, the joy that didn't have to be useful. But you can't go back, because that version of you wouldn't survive in the world you've built. So you perform again, you smile again, you rise again, and it empties you just a little more. You aren't tired because you've done too much. You're tired because you've been someone else for too long. This is the beginning of the real burnout, not of the body, but of the soul. You've become a symbol, a solution, a walking proof of what's possible, and now the applause sounds more like pressure than praise. The spotlight feels like interrogation. You want to scream, but you don't. You want to quit, but you won't, because people are counting on you. But when you lie in bed at 2 a.m., staring at the ceiling, your thoughts betray you. What if they love the role I play, but not the person I am? That's when the mirror starts to crack. You see it in the small things, the hesitation before posting, the resentment behind the smile, the grief that arrives without permission. This is your shadow, what Jung described as everything you refuse to acknowledge about yourself. It doesn't come to ruin you, it comes to free you, but only if you let it speak. You remember something Shams Tabrizi once said, "When everyone is trying to be something, be nothing, range with emptiness." Because emptiness, when it's not feared, becomes space, and space is where healing begins. You thought your exhaustion was a flaw, but it was a flare, a signal, a sacred invitation to stop pretending. You start to imagine what that would look like, to take the mask off. Not forever, just long enough to breathe. You imagine saying, "I'm not okay. I don't want to be the strong one today. I need someone to hold my hand, not my legacy." And even the thought of that makes your chest loosen, just a little. You stand in that mirror, gold around your neck, success in your inbox, tears in your eyes. And for the first time, you see something real, not your strength, your surrender. And in that moment, you begin to realize that the only way to survive being the hollow champion is to stop being hollow. There's a story the world forgot how to tell. It's not about victory or charisma or building empires in your 20s. It's about a boy named Ping. The emperor gave every child in the land a seed and said, "Grow this, bring me your best in 1 year." The children ran home, planted their seeds, waited, and soon green shoots rose across the kingdom. Except for Ping, he watered it, watched it, waited, but nothing grew. A year passed. The other children arrived with lush flowers, towering stalks, radiant color. But Ping, with shaking hands, carried an empty pot. The emperor looked at them all, then he smiled. "These seeds," he said, "were boiled. None of them could grow. Every bloom you see is a lie. But this boy brought me the truth." And that's how Ping became the next emperor. Not because he succeeded, but because he refused to fake it. That story, that's you now. Because for years you were handed seeds that could never bloom. Not because you lacked effort, but because what they gave you was never meant to grow your truth. They gave you the seed of image, the seed of performance, the seed of be good, be strong, be impressive. And you did it all. You made it bloom, or so it looked. But inside the pot remained empty. And now you're tired, not from the watering, from the pretending, from holding up a version of your life that was never rooted in anything real. You want to put the pot down. You want to say, "This is what I have. This is what I feel. This is the truth," even if it's not beautiful, because what they called failure might be the most honest thing you've ever carried. Jung called this the path of individuation. Not the construction of a better mask, but the courageous removal of the one you've outgrown. And in its place, not clarity, not certainty, but soil. Rich, dark, unfamiliar soil. Waiting for the first real thing you've planted in years. You don't need to grow for admiration anymore. You grow because your soul asked you to. You grow because the season changed. Not on the calendar, but in your chest. You no longer bloom for applause, you bloom for peace. And suddenly your empty pot isn't something to hide. It's something sacred, proof that you chose honesty over illusion. And slowly you begin to trust that something beautiful can grow not from the lies you told to survive, but from the truth you finally dared to show. You were crowned too early, not with a literal crown, but with a role, the responsible one, the strong one, the one who always keeps it together. It sounded like praise, it felt like power, but slowly it became a burden. You didn't ask for it, but you wore it anyway, so out of love, out of fear, out of instinct, and somewhere along the way you forgot how to take it off. Carl Jung wrote, "We meet ourselves time and again in 1,000 disguises on the path of life." But what happens when the disguise becomes too convincing? What happens when even your joy starts to feel like acting? You've spent years holding yourself together in front of people who never asked how you were doing when no one needed you. You walked into rooms full of admirers and left feeling more alone than ever. Because what they were applauding wasn't you. It was the version of you that never cried, never cracked, never confessed. But deep down, there's a fracture in the gold, a hairline crack in the crown. You feel it when you wake up with dread and call it drive. You feel it when the silence after success is louder than the applause. You feel it when you almost leave it all behind, not because you're lost, but because staying means disappearing for good. And maybe that's the moment something shifts. You realize you're not burned out because you're weak. You're burned out because you believed that being loved meant being useful, but usefulness isn't love, and image isn't intimacy. You've been holding up a version of yourself the world would never question, but that version is hollow now. It looks like you, talks like you, but it doesn't breathe like you. So you do something dangerous. You sit down and you stop holding it up. You look at the crown in your hands, beautiful but heavy. and realize it was never made for you. You were meant to feel the wind on your face, not the pressure of 1,000 invisible expectations. And that's when the image begins to crack. You remember Ping, the boy with the empty pot, how everyone else brought lies in bloom, and he showed up with failure, with truth, and was chosen for it. You look at your own pot now, not full of flowers, but full of years pretending to bloom, and you finally say, enough. You don't have to be strong every moment. You don't have to carry everyone. You don't have to turn pain into poetry on command. You can be here, broken, breathing, becoming, without trying to be impressive. You realize something profound. They loved you for the light, but your wholeness lives in the shadow too. So you let yourself rest, not as retreat, but as revolution. And in that stillness, a new kind of strength rises, not the kind that builds empires, the kind that reclaims your soul. No crown, no mask, just you, finally light enough to rise. And then it happens, not with fireworks, not with a revelation, but with stillness. You wake up and you're not rushing. You open your eyes and there's no voice whispering, prove yourself. You sit in a quiet room and realize you don't need to be anyone else today. That's what peace feels like, not perfection, permission to speak without performing, to rest without guilt, to be seen without the need to shine. You're not trying to inspire anymore. You're just trying to be honest. You're not trying to be enough. You've remembered that you already are. Rabindranath Tagore wrote, "The butterfly counts not months but moments and has time enough. And now you have time to heal without being productive, time to listen without broadcasting, time to laugh at things that aren't clever, just real. You're no longer afraid of the quiet because you've lived through the noise. And it almost cost you your voice. Now, applause is something you hear, not something you need. Now, you remember what it felt like before they named you, before the title, before the brand, before success became a costume you couldn't take off. You see yourself clearly, not as a product, but as a person, whole, messy, enough. The gold mask has cracked, the crown is in the corner, and somehow without either of them you feel more real than you ever did wearing them. You still lead, you still build, but now you do it from truth. Now you do it from stillness. Now you do it as someone who no longer fears being unseen. You've remembered who you were before the world taught you to disappear behind excellence. And now when they applaud, you smile, you nod, but you don't absorb it as identity, because the person they're clapping for, she's already home, he's already whole. And if this story felt like your story, it's because it was. This wasn't content. This was a mirror. And if all you do from this moment forward is breathe deeper, walk slower, and stop proving your worth to people who only knew your mask, you've already won. Not because the world says so, but because you do, and that is the kind of success that never leaves you empty.